Can everyone hear me okay? I'm trying a new laptop. I'm seeing yes in the chat. Let me know if you can't at any point. But hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and sharing the next 90 or so minutes together on your Wednesday evening. And I appreciate you introducing yourselves in the chat and also filling out the poll questions. I'll leave the poll up for a few minutes so the rest of you who are joining now can fill it out. My name is Brennison Wheeler. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Education and Outreach Coordinator at Women's Advocates, which is a nonprofit organization in St. Paul, Minnesota, that offers a continuum of safety through our prevention programming, such as these webinars, emergency shelter, and aftercare housing support services for victim survivors of domestic violence. This is the last webinar in Hennepin County's library 4-part Empowering You series. And today's webinar is on the power of saying no and how to say it. So this is a webinar, so you are not, you can't be heard or seen as an attendee, so don't worry about that. And if the subtitles are distracting at all, you can click the live transcript button and hide them. And then a few quick announcements and reminders, because we often get questions about this, is that we will be sending out a follow-up email with a link of the recording of the webinar, as well as the PDF of the PowerPoint slides. And then I'll also send information about how to request a certificate of attendance. And that will be at the end of the webinar and in the follow-up email. So if you have to leave early, that's okay. You'll get it in the email. And then before we officially dive into tonight's webinar, I wanted to extend a huge thank you to the friends of the Minneapolis Central Library for helping us make this event happen. And I also wanted to acknowledge and extend gratitude for our American Sign Language, or ASL, interpretation services, which are provided by Think Self Minnesota, Deaf Education and Advocacy's Specialized Interpreting Fellowship Training, or SIFT program. And then also thank you for all of you for being here. And I know a lot of you have attended these webinars since, March of 2020, which is just incredible to think about. And so I'm really honored to be a part of this community that we've all kind of created online. And if you're new and joining, welcome. And we'll begin with reviewing our objectives for this evening. So when you registered for this event, you would have seen these 3 objectives. So the next 90 minutes are more or less split up into these 3 different sections, which will explore these different questions and maybe a little bit more as well. And you're always invited and encouraged to type responses, things you think of, reactions, anything in the chat. Part of the thing that I love so much about the webinars is the engagement from the people who show up and participate in the webinar. So feel free to also use the Q&A if there is like a very specific question that you don't want to get lost in the chat or anything. And with that being said, I do want to end the poll. This is like the highest response rate we've ever had. But this is what you all reported in terms of kind of a weather theme for how you're currently feeling. And it seems like 38% of us who filled out the survey said that they're feeling partly cloudy. And then right behind it is 33% of us report that we are feeling mostly sunny. I would say I'm feeling mostly sunny as well too. And then in terms of why you registered for this webinar, there's a tie between wanting to learn more about how to say no in your personal life and also wanting to learn more about how to support others in saying no. So hopefully you will walk away with some tangible tips and supportive things for your reasoning for attending this webinar. So we'll actually start again with another poll. This one is pretty quick. I'm curious to know when is the last time you said no to anything or anyone? So, we all have different experiences and feelings about this, which is honestly why this webinar exists. And for me, the last time I remember saying no was actually this week, which I'm very, very proud of. I was asked to take on another project that I didn't have the time for. And so I kindly let them know that I did not have the capacity for it at this time, even though it seemed really important and uh, something that would take a lot of consideration and time and care. And they said, okay, thank you for letting me know. And that was it. That was the interaction. Pretty wild, right? Because for a long time, I didn't think that interactions like that existed or that they could go well, or I even allowed saying no to be an option for me. So feel free to expand on your poll response in the chat. And just remember to click the button again to send your message to all panelists and attendees, because I'd love to see what you have to say. So I'll give a few more seconds for this poll. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end it in 3, 2, 1. Okay. So 28% of us said, I said no to something this week, just like me. Wow. And then 23% said they said no to something today. Wow. I would love to know if you want to share what those things were. But then there's also quite a few, a handful of us that said earlier this month, something in the year, which, for context, it is the end of June. And then there is one person who said that they think that they've never said no to anything, which is all completely valid. And so thank you for sharing that and stopping and taking a moment to just think about when the last time you said no was. Take a peek at the chat. So I'm seeing someone in the chat saying no to a brother when the brother wanted to meet and explain they have a lot of homework to catch up on. Culture plays a big role in not making it easy to say no. Absolutely. We're going to touch on that. Great. Okay, so speaking of culture and our identities and everything, if you attended the last webinar in this 4-part Empowering You series, a slide like this will not be new to you, because just as how there are so many unique contributors to consider about our varying situations, our lives, our relationships, our experiences, there's also a plethora of factors that are unique to us as individuals that contribute to our relationship with the word no and how we engage with it. And I think it's always really important to create space for and to name that while we may have similar experiences, none of what I say in this webinar is universal or something that will always consistently apply or make sense for everyone. And that is more than okay. So if a suggestion that I make is something that will not work for you, I invite you to bring attention to it and share it in the chat, share more about how you would approach things differently so we can all learn and grow. And so on this slide, you'll see some different sections and things that I personally considered as contributors, and I would encourage you to add anything if you think anything is missing, and add any unique things that contribute to your personal perspective of the word no. But I'll give some examples as we're thinking about identities and values and cultures, all of that. We hold on to those things and we interact with, they influence our comfort levels, right? And what saying no means and what our perception of what is expected of us and what is normal for people to say and do. And I also want to name that maybe you experience social anxiety that makes saying no especially difficult. There's so many different things. It's not as easy as just, saying no and not worrying about any consequences or considering any other experiences. So some examples that I thought of is, for me personally, a culture example could be that Being Chinese, I'm expected by others to be submissive and always say yes. It could be a lot of different factors, also that I am a woman. And so I think that certain cultures can point to that. Again, that's not exclusive, and that's not only for being Chinese, but that's just one example. And a value example could be harmony. So if you're someone who values harmony, they might never say no because you want to keep the peace and you don't want to have any conflict or anything that could be perceived as conflict. Um, an identity example could be growing up in a low income household, maybe having to say yes to everything just to survive in terms of maybe things at work or picking up more shifts and creating this expectation of yourself to never say no and to be a yes person. And then that kind of brings us to our upbringing, how we were raised, our external environment, maybe things that we witnessed when we were younger, interactions with other family members, and also the community. And so that can really set the tone for how we interact with other people saying no to us and our ability to say no to other people. And so an example could be hearing, you're a good boy if you do what you're told, if you don't question anything and you make other people happy, from adults in the home. That can contribute to someone not feeling empowered or allowed to say no or express a differing opinion, right? And then others could be other experiences. So it could be related to trauma, or it could even be unhealthy relationships that have these porous boundaries that can make the word no feel unsafe. And so an example of an experience could be that maybe you've never seen anyone in your home say no before, or seeing others in your home be punished for saying no. So all of those experiences can contribute to someone feeling uncomfortable, unable, or unfamiliar with saying no. But also on the flip side of that, some of us may not struggle with saying no because maybe saying no was modeled in a really healthy way for us during our upbringing, during our early childhood, our early adulthood, or maybe it's just something that we just now became more comfortable with. So it's all a unique journey. I also am seeing that some things are coming up in the chat, so I just wanted to take a moment to read them. Being a people pleaser can make it hard to say no because you think that someone won't like you. It can be taxing on the mind. We don't feel free that you can say no. Saying no at work can mean that you seem like you're not willing to be part of the team. Saying no at work, yep. Equating no to rejection, right? Like really personalizing that response and saying, oh, if they're saying no to this request, they're saying no to me as a person or to our relationship. Some people are bringing up their family and how they communicated, that their core family, the communication style is and still is or was passive aggressive. And so that can be a barrier to being able to feel like you can say no. Other people are talking about letting others down, saying yes up front, but then maybe not following through. Yeah, I think that if that is a common thing where you say yes to everything, but then you regret it or you wish that you hadn't, that can be a common trend as well too. Well, thank you for sharing those things. We will keep that in mind as we continue. But our first step is to, again, understand our associations with the word no, and also kind of dive a little bit deeper into what stands in our way of saying it more and how can we navigate those barriers. So we'll first start with exploring our associations. So it seems like a lot of you have an awareness of kind of the barriers of saying no. And I have a few like exploratory questions that you can think about. You can journal about them. You can write about them in the chat. But I'm really curious what people think about in terms of what kind of people can say no. I think for a while, I really believed that saying no was only reserved for a certain kind of person, where they were just so highly esteemed and they have the ability and they could be afforded to say no because they already had an abundance of opportunities and prestige and things like that. But I know also other people believe that saying no, the kind of people that say no are selfish, right? They have this belief that, oh, it's easy for that person to say no because they don't think of anyone except for themselves, or, what is your idea about who says no? And then kind of flipping that on its head a little bit and saying, can I say no? Have you had experiences where other people reacted to you saying no in a way that made it uncomfortable or just inconvenient, or other things that could deter you from feeling comfortable saying no? Or is saying no even an option that even pops into your head when you're asked to do something? I know for a while that I've had, someone at work or a friend say, you can say no, right? You can consider that you don't have to always say yes or bend backwards and do all these different things to try to make it work. You have the ability to say no. And then another question is, what does it mean if someone says no? So thinking about your own reaction to other people saying no to you. And if you have positive experiences, I know in the past that I have had people who have, I've asked to either spend time with them or do something with them, and they might not have the time, and I feel very secure in our connection to say, oh, I'm not going to take that personally. Like, I understand that they're really busy or they don't have the time. And I say, I completely understand. Thank you for letting me know. Maybe we can find another time. And thinking of, oh, there's a possibility that other people could react a similar way to me as well, and extend understanding and grace and kindness to me as well. Seeing in the chat that when someone started saying no recently, a lot of people didn't like the change. Too bad. Yeah, I think we'll talk a little bit about that, of like navigating people's responses, where if you have been a person where people expect you to say yes to everything and you start to assert more boundaries, then that is an adjustment for them. But I agree with the sentiment that if it is a strong relationship, it will adapt to be able to honor your needs as well. Yeah, and there's in the chat talking about how being more okay with others saying no to me, of like, oh, I can handle that. That's super easy. But if I were to say it to them, I would feel like our relationship was in jeopardy, or I'd worry about what they would think, lots of things like that. Yeah. So similar to that, there are a lot of barriers to saying no, and we've had a lot of boundary webinars in the past, and this comes up a lot where I've heard these exact quotes from people of, I can't say no because I want this person to like me. It sounds rude. It doesn't feel safe. I'm not allowed to. I put other people first, so my needs don't matter as much. Maybe I don't even know how to say it. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't come easily to me. Believing that saying no creates division and disconnection, that maybe it's just easier to just say yes if you've experienced someone who's pressuring or coercive, or maybe just, you don't want to expend the energy it takes to follow through with saying no. Maybe you like to do everything and say yes to everything. I know that was a mentality that I have had and still kind of struggle with now. And also this last one too, like, I technically can do what's being asked of me. So then you kind of talk yourself out of saying no, because it's something that a kind of affirmation I tell myself is, just because you can do something doesn't mean that you have to do it. Right. And so if there's anything else that you would add to this list as a barrier, please feel free to type it in the chat. I would imagine you're not the only one who has thought that thought before. But I think it's important to address and acknowledge what those barriers are, instead of kind of expecting them to magically go away without bringing awareness to them. Okay, so I see something in the chat talking about guilt as a mom if I say no. Right, of like, what are the consequences of that, or what does it mean? What kind of mom am I if I say no? Yep, someone's bringing up living living and experiencing abuse and never being able to say no. But the person who is abusive can say no, and that person has to accept it, right? So that is a great example that underscores the importance of talking about the trauma response, of how that can be a huge contributor to us not even feeling like no is an accessible word to add to our personal dictionary. And so many of you probably know about the trauma response, that there are three that people think of: fight, flight, and freeze. So you can see those on the screen here. And you also see a fourth circle that says fawn. And so I think that is a trauma response that gets a little less attention than the other three. And I think it's really relevant because sometimes people don't realize that they've engaged in this trauma response, which is really chosen by your body. You don't get to assess and say, oh, here are my four options. I'm going to decide to run away in this situation. Like, your body kind of just goes to it. And so for a lot of us, when we are experiencing a fawning trauma response, these are kind of the 12 different kind of ways that you can experience it, and you can know that you might kind of default to that response when you are either in a traumatic situation, or maybe it's not and it's from a past trauma, and so you're just so used to fawning. And what that really is very similar to people pleasing, right? So you look to other people for them to tell you how you feel in a relationship or in a situation. Maybe you feel like you don't have an identity, or that you're constantly trying to please everyone in your life, and that the first sign of conflict, your first instinct is to appease the person who is angry. And that can be a direct result of experiencing abuse, for sure. Maybe you have learned to ignore your own beliefs, your own thoughts, your own truths, and accept those of other people around you because of the consequences of not doing that. You also may experience unusual emotional responses to issues that involve people of importance. So sometimes emotional outbursts at strangers or sudden sadness throughout the day, that's a common experience. Again, saying no to others around you is a challenge. Lacking boundaries, uncomfortable or threatened when asked to give an opinion, things like that. So those can all be indicators of the fawn response. And then when you have no boundaries, people can take advantage of you. Yeah, someone wrote that in the chat. And I'm also seeing a request for me to let people know to send their messages to all of us. But I try to read as many as I can out loud, just in case people can't see it, and also for the recording for people who can't see the chat. So I will quickly launch a poll, which is about the fawn response. And just curious if of those 12 examples on the screen, if any of those have resonate with you in any way. And you don't have to count, you can kind of estimate or pick the one that feels. Didn't finish my sentence, sorry. Pick the one that feels most like you. Like about 30 more seconds for this poll. Okay, 10 seconds to wrap it up. Okay. So 30% of us reported that, yes, I have experienced at least 3 of the examples. And no one selected that they haven't experienced any of those examples. So that is good to know. Thank you for sharing that. And know that with that, you are not alone. There's a lot of people who have experienced some of those examples of fawning. And so It is very common, even if it's not as talked about as fight, flight, and freeze. Okay, so very related to this whole idea of people pleasing and everything like that. I really like these two graphics because they talk about, the difference between people pleasing and authentic kindness and authentic connection. And so I think that for a while, I thought all of it was the same, right? I thought that the way that I was people pleasing, the way I was interacting with other people was what authentic kindness was or connection, but really it came at a detriment and often at a sacrifice of my own integrity and my own feeling and sense of self and my needs, and that those were often really ignored. And so some of the ones that really stand out to me on this list for me personally was I disappoint people sometimes, and that's okay. Like, that's a hard one for me to sit with. Of course, if it's someone that you really care about, you don't want to disappoint them. But when you have a secure relationship and it's healthy and it's reciprocal, there will be times where you might do something that's disappointing, and that, sometimes you chose your own holistic well-being over being there for someone, or canceling dinner plans or something, and that might disappoint people. And so I think that's something that stood out to me. If there's anything on this list that stands out to you, feel free to share and expand in the chat. But I think that this provides a nice outline of how we can start saying no to some of our people pleasing tendencies that don't feel in alignment to who we are and who we want to be, and start saying yes to these things of authentic kindness and authentic connection. And there's a question in the chat about screenshotting. Yeah, you can totally screenshot some of the slides, but you will be getting a copy of the slides as well as a PDF. But yeah, this is from the Holistic Psychologist Instagram. Okay. So the second step is about the value of saying no and how saying no can help us reclaim agency of our own lives. So that last slide about people pleasing and comparing that to authentic kindness and authentic connection underscores this answer to the question of what is the value of saying no. It's that ability to achieve that authentic connection. If we feel like no is never an option, it might be difficult to truly feel authentic kindness and connection with other people and ourselves. So here are some positive aspects of saying no. So we already talked about cultivating authentic connections, relationships, and experiences. And I also think of how important it is to have that as an option, because I have personally said yes to a lot of things, to everything that I possibly could. And, sometimes I've dropped the ball on things because it isn't possible to be in multiple places at one time if you overcommit yourself. And so it's actually an act of kindness and respect to be able to have that ability to say no, and for people to feel like you're doing things truly because you want to and not because it's what they expect of you or you feel like you have no other option. And so being able to build trust in yourself and with other people can be another positive aspect of saying no, of trusting. Maybe your intuition is telling you, oh, I don't really feel like, doing this. I might have a bad experience with it, so I'm going to hang back. Being able to honor that, honor yourself, honor your time, honor your energy, your values, your wellness, all of those things can be positive aspects of saying no. Another could be empowerment, self-agency, feeling connected to yourself and having the ability to do the things that you're already doing well, with intention and with the appropriate amount of time. And so I think that all of those things can be really positive. I'm seeing in the chat someone saying needing to work on setting clear boundaries instead of being seen as the nice person who people always dump on because they show up for them, but they don't usually reciprocate. Yeah, I think that was something that was in that people pleasing of most people pleasers don't feel like their people pleasing tendencies are reciprocated. And then sometimes we have these feelings of resentment or regret or distrust, and or frustration, right? Of why am I the person that's always there for everyone, but no one's there for me? And so being able to have that ability to step back and say, hey, I don't have the energy, the capacity, the time for this. Can we schedule another time? Or these are what my needs are in our relationship and our connection. And can we talk about uh, how they can be fulfilled, you know? So feel free if you think of any other positive things. So for some of you in the chat who are saying, I just started saying no and people are adjusting to it, but this is why it's worth it. So you can definitely bring that up. In the chat, someone's saying, I've seen something once called moral identity or something like that, where if you don't always say yes or are the kindness you can be, you feel a betrayal to your identity and it can feel devastating. Yeah, that's a good point of thinking of like kind of like your moral compass and also closely assigning that to your self-value or your self-worth, and it can feel like a betrayal. So that's the whole point of this too, of like maybe, and we'll get into like what we're saying yes and what we're saying no to. But again, if it's not, the whole point is for you to feel authentic and in alignment with your own values, your goals, and who you are. And so, and that can also be a process too, where initially it feels like betrayal, but then later it might feel supportive. So that is all in the growth and healing journey for sure. So I mentioned agency, and I think that agency is really important to define. And so I like this definition of agency that I found on the internet of saying that it's the capacity of a person to act in any given environment, the capacity of individuals to act independently and to make their own free choices. And I added a little bit there of including saying no to things that they do not want to do, cannot do not know how to do not have time to do, cannot afford to do not have the energy to do. And I just really emphasize the fact that you can just not want to do it. You don't have to have a extremely convincing or robust explanation for why you can't do something or why you're choosing to say no to something. And so I think that thinking about it in that sense of reclaiming our agency can make it a little bit easier potentially for us to think about our ability to say no. And so you don't have to have experienced abuse to feel like you don't have a sense of personal agency. So nothing like explicit or particular had to have happened, but it could just be a culmination of so many different things where you just don't feel like you have control over your life or that you can make these decisions or that you have to base all of your decisions off of other people and you never take yourself into consideration. So if you think of anything else that you want to add to the list of things that you want to say no to, feel free, but we'll continue to talk about that as well. Okay, so we'll get into some more tangible things now. So in terms of different contexts when saying no, so some of you said that you're really interested in learning more about your personal life, others said professional, and others said just helping other people. So maybe saying no is something that comes really naturally to you, so it's difficult to think of what it could be like for someone who it doesn't come naturally to. And so there's a lot of different contexts. So one of the ones that I thought of is technology. And I thought I've been seeing a lot about urgency culture, and we're going to talk about that later too. But this idea that we have to respond right away. The second we get an email, the second we get a text, we have to be on it. We have to always be growing and expanding and responding, and we're always behind. And we're in this culture of urgency and also a culture of, inadequacy or scarcity that, if you don't seize your opportunity, you're going to lose the moment, all of these things. And so technology can be a difficult medium in saying no, but some tips, so if you get a request or someone asks something of you, through a text or a phone call, maybe you can consider not responding right away. Maybe you even set a timer for a certain number of minutes before you draft a response. I know I've done that sometimes where maybe it's something where I'm emotionally charged, whether it's like very positively or very negatively or somewhere in between, that I'm just operating with my emotional mind and not my logic mind or my wise mind, right? The combination of those two. And so being able to even just pause and just think for a little bit can definitely help provide more clarity about what you want to say. So you're bringing more intention and honoring your future self too, who will have to kind of deal with the consequences of that your initial decision. Maybe you don't open the message until you're ready to respond. So maybe you see the little notification in your notification bar in your phone or whatever device you have, and you are like, you know what? I don't have capacity or the energy for this. If I open it, I'll forget to respond or think that I already responded. So I'll just let it sit there for a little bit before until I have the capacity and the time to really provide a considerate response. So maybe something that you say is, I appreciate you thinking of me. Can we set up a time to talk about it further? If that's too formal, depending on the context, maybe you say, I would love to talk about this more. When do you have, 30 minutes or a certain number of minutes or whatever you think would be sufficient for discussing whatever the request was. So if you have any other tips for technology and saying no, feel free. I know sometimes it can be difficult with kind of read receipts and other people. I know sometimes people really communicate through memes or like pictures or gifs or other things. So maybe you can even let a little dog with a sign say no for you, or say, oh no, I'm sorry, I can't do that. And someone saying not responding to work emails while you're on vacation. I think that I'm sure if someone did a study on that, there would be a wide percentage of people who are on PTO. They have their I'm away from my email automatic response on, but they're still checking them and they're still responding when they can. And that you can say no again to the constantly on call culture. So that definitely applies. And then someone mentioned the automatic reply, so we'll just jump over to the professional context for a second. So I've seen other people, I haven't done this myself, I'll be honest, but I've seen other people add, it may take me 2 to 3 business days to respond to your email as an automatic response, or in your email signature too. So when you're sending an email and they respond, they can see and have the expectation that, okay, I'm not going to get a response within the hour, but I can expect this person to get back to me in 2 to 3 business days. So if that feels like supportive for what your goals are and your own sense of comfort and ease, and alleviate some pressure, I would recommend maybe you try it out. See how other people respond. Maybe they say, wow, I really appreciate that, or maybe people don't think too much of it, but at least they know when to expect a response from you. Maybe you set up boundaries and systems and expectations, right, that facilitate more comfort with saying no. And so again, if you have created this kind of identity and persona of yourself where you're someone who always says yes at work, it can be really difficult to start going against the grain for that. And I know I've definitely experienced that too. And I have had the pleasant experience of that being very respected and encouraged and applauded even. And so I think that there is a way, it's not your destiny, right? Just because you started out a certain way or people have this conception of you, you can always kind of rewrite that a little bit, or at least make some attempts to. I think one of the hardest for me personally, which it can be different for everyone, is saying no in the moment. So again, I do have those people pleasing tendencies for sure. And if someone asks me something on the spot, sometimes I don't even think, sometimes I don't even process what they even asked me. I'm like, yeah, of course. And then like a few seconds later, or even a few minutes later, I'll realize, oh, wait, I can't I can't even do that. Like, I didn't even think about it. I have another plan or something else going on. And so, a way to kind of avoid saying the automatic yes without thinking it through is to maybe, again, take a breath, count to 10 before responding. And, you don't have to stand there and say, I'm counting 10, 1, 2, 3, 4. Like, you can do it in your head. And again, with that urgency culture of maybe that person's not expecting you to speak as they're speaking or right after they asked you the question, and they might say, are you okay? And you can say, oh, I'm just thinking about what you said, or just taking that breath of just pausing. And again, you can say something like, thank you for asking me that. Can I have a moment to think about it? Do you mind if we talk about something else while I think about what you asked? Because again, that can feel pressure if they're waiting for your response and you don't know what it is yet, but then you are already having a conversation or you're spending time with that person for a longer period of time, then that's a way to kind of address that of like, let's circle back, right? Let's do the circle back method and come back to it later. Maybe you say, it means a lot to me that you asked me this. I want to give it a thoughtful response. Can I call you and talk about it more tomorrow morning, or give kind of a more concrete timeline? So those are some tips, just some things to consider that might ease the process of saying no or building up to saying no. Yeah, so someone's kind of reiterating what has worked for me is at work saying that can I get back to you with my response? Someone asks, yeah, but what if your boss keeps emailing you? Yeah, I think again, it's saying no to the urgency culture of, I acknowledge that my boss is continuing to ask me things, and if you send an email that says, I would like to request, at least by the end of the day to have a response to you, and they keep responding and sending more emails. I mean, that's really a judgment call for you for what you want to do, but you can kind of reiterate what you're saying of like kind of reasserting your boundary of, I hear what you're asking of me, but this having, allowing me this amount of time will create a more conducive environment for me to be able to support what you're asking me, and kind of explaining it a little bit. So I don't know if that's helpful, or if you're like, if my boss is emailing, I have to respond. I can't just send an automatic response that says, I'll get back to you in 2 to 3 days. So that might just be a conversation that you have during a supervision meeting too. I'm seeing in the chat that at someone's work, their department has had to tell people they can no longer show up at our desk to get their work pushed in front of other people that also need their work done. Yeah, so setting kind of workplace culture for, how do we navigate these requests? How do we navigate needing something from someone, and what's the best way? So it could be a conversation about communication styles of like, how can I communicate a request to you best, and how much time in advance do you need? And just having it be a little more personalized and informed of that person. So it's really a supportive dynamic that's not just, oh, I need things done on my timeline. The other person is being taken into consideration too. Someone also is offering in the chat, if you need a response now, the answer is no. If you can wait, it might be yes. Yeah, I think for some people, like I'm from Florida, and so we have a very direct way of communicating. So that's just a little different. In Minnesota, where there's like a little bit more passive aggression, a little bit more kind of reading between the lines. And so I think that, that style might not be for everyone. I actually really appreciate that, because I think it could be very effective of someone saying, okay, yeah, let me just wait a little bit longer. Let me practice some patience, and then I might get the result that I was hoping for. Yeah, more explanation in the chat of like having days off and being called in to do things, and being able, again, goes back to kind of the boundaries. Okay. So this is a quote that I found that I really appreciated. And so it says, our lives are lived in seasons of more, seasons of less, seasons of triumph, seasons of loss. Each season sees our needs change. We live, learn, and adapt. so too must our definition of meaning. Things that grow in one season rot in another. If we blindly hold on to the past, we'll be forced to sustain ourselves with the expiring beliefs from seasons gone by. No wonder we're often left feeling unsatisfied, empty, starving for substance. In order to live fulfilling lives, we have to embrace the shifting nature of our experience by making our search for meaning an ongoing practice. So I really liked that quote because it reminded me of the journey, right? And that kind of the way that we have thought about things, approached things, maybe particularly for work or particularly in our personal relationships, as we grow and as time passes and things are different and evolving, our responses to them, and we might realize we've been holding on to a tendency that's no longer serving us. So how can we let go of that? And how can we have the awareness to even assess that that is no longer working? And so, yeah, if anyone has any thoughts about the quote, feel free to share. So that kind of segues us into our third step of how do we actually say no, mean it, and feel good about saying no at work and our personal lives and beyond. So someone put in the chat something related to the quote on the other slide of some people are in our lives for a season, a reason, or a lifetime. I think that's a great reminder too of who are we saying no to? And maybe it's easier for us to say no to the people who are here for a season. And it's harder for us to say no to people who we feel like will be there for a lifetime. And so that's just something to assess. We'll kind of talk about that a little bit later as well. So these are some different approaches to saying no. So this is from Seeking Safety by Lisa M. Navajides. I think that's how it's pronounced. If not, let me know. But I adapted it. So there was an example about drinking. So I just replaced it with an example about a coworker continually asking you to do their job for them and tasks that are not within your scope. So it's a very specific example, but I think the kind of essence of each of these responses can be applied to a lot of different work situations or even personal situations too. So one approach could be this idea of a polite refusal. So maybe you say, thank you for thinking of me for this, but I cannot do that at this time, right? Short and simple. Maybe you have your insistent and you say, I really cannot continue to cover for you. I would like for you to not ask me again. Again, that's very in line with a direct communication style, which may not be something that is, the norm for the people that you interact with, and that could, be met with a lot of confusion or hurt or other things. So again, always assess, but that is just an option. Another option or approach is partial honesty. So saying, I cannot work on this because my plate is completely full. So maybe that's not the whole truth, but it's enough. It's in alignment with the truth, but you're not explaining the whole story. In terms of how you feel. So maybe you're like, oh, it's partially because my plate's full, but the full reason is because it's also not my job. So that could be the full honesty approaches of I cannot work on this because it is not within the bounds of my job. And you could also add in that you're super busy as well, if that's what the full truth is. And then the alternative approach is also stating consequences. So saying something like, this is the fourth time this week that you've asked me to do tasks that fall under your responsibility. If this continues, I might have to consider reaching out to our supervisor to work on a solution, which I think for some people who have experienced examples of that fawning response or have experienced abusive relationships or coercive or exploitive relationships, saying something like that can feel icky. Like I know for me, I probably wouldn't default to stating consequences because it feels like power and feels like a weird power differential. But I do see value in it and it being effective of, sometimes continuing to say that I can't do this, I can't do this isn't working. And that person doesn't seem to care that you're saying that you can't do something. So maybe that's when you try out stating consequences. And maybe you don't think of them as consequences, you think of them as, stating, a sequence of events, right? So this happens and then this happens, which again is a consequence, but there's a lot of negative connotation, I think, sometimes to the word consequence. So you can think about what variation feels, resonates with you and feels most like you. But I do have two polls that I'll launch at the same time here. The first question is, which approach of those five to saying no do you think you currently use the most now? And then which approach to saying no do you want to use more? And I also saw someone raise their hand. If that was intentional, let me know if you want to be unmuted or if you just want to type something in the chat or ask a question in the Q&A. I also just want to remind everyone too that everyone's style is different and unique. So there's definitely not a right answer for these that, the stating consequences approach is the best and most effective. And, that's really going to depend on you and the situation and things too. These are just kind of models of and ways of thinking of how you can approach this. So I'll give about 20 more seconds before ending the poll. All right, I'll go ahead and end it. So 51% of us said that partial honesty is the approach to saying no that you use the most right now. And then 38% said that they use polite refusal most of the time. And then in terms of what approach do you want to use more, 54% said that they want to try out full honesty. And then others are saying polite refusal might be one that they want to try to use more. Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. And maybe even assessing, like, do other people in my organization say no? How do they say no? Do they typically lean on polite refusal? Are they super honest? And you're like, wow, I respect that. That's great. Or whatever your response is, just kind of evaluating what that culture is like in your workplace too, and other people and how it feels. So again, on that receiving end of someone saying one of these things to you, how would that feel and what would the response be? Yeah, there's a chat response saying that a friend of mine told me no is a complete sentence. I actually have a quote about that in just a few slides here, but yeah, this person said, I always say why after my no, and I have recently stopped explaining it. And it's funny, half the time, no one even seems to want to hear my why. I've wasted my time and energy because I think I always have to say why not to feel bad, or why to not feel bad. Yeah. So I think that is really true of, yeah, you don't have to have a long-winded explanation or apology to accompany your no. So it can say, no, I can't do this. And you don't have to apologize, you don't have to drag it on. And I, definitely agree that people they're just looking for your response, right? And if you just say no, again, they might just respond and say, hey, thanks for letting me know. Great. Okay. Here are some more tips. So I had a lot of fun with these graphics, obviously, but the first one is about planning ahead and being prepared. So if you know someone continually or routinely asks you to do something that you don't want to do, maybe you plan ahead. Maybe you rehearse with someone that feels safe, or you rehearse by yourself out loud how you want to respond. Maybe anticipate what their rebuttals or how they might pressure you, what that might sound like, and then again, how you can respond to that. And maybe you write down bullet points like in your notes app and your phone. I've done that many a times. Or even take out a legal pad, a sticky note, or whatever, and kind of jot down your thoughts of creating your own kind of map of, if this happens, I'll do this, and just kind of having a little bit more thought and intention around it, that can make it a little bit easier, or feel a little more familiar, or feel more prepared to be able to say no and kind of keep your word on that too. And then another is confidence is key when keeping it simple, right? So we were just talking about that of, I think about Minnesotan culture, that no's are often similar to Minnesotan goodbyes that are really long-winded, that last a long time. And you're like, okay, I was ready to say goodbye the first time you said it. And then, it can create, unnecessary annoyance, or consumption of time, whatever the case is. So keeping it simple and short, being very clear, not being like, oh, maybe, or no if this, but yes if this, or kind of making it a little complicated, trying to keep it clear and simple and short. Maybe you offer an alternative, so saying no to the original request, but saying yes to a modified version. So maybe you that kind of contradicts what I was saying earlier, but if you say, no, I can't have this to you by this deadline, but I can have it to you by this new deadline, or kind of modifying it in a way so you don't always have to say no entirely. You can offer something else that is more in alignment with what you have capacity for. And I think someone mentioned this earlier, of saying maybe the first time. Buy yourself some time. Say, to think about that, or uh, I'll for now, or like tentative, even if it's a calendar invite, you can hit the response maybe and think about it more, and then make a final decision later when it gets a little closer, or other things like that. So maybe saying a hard no immediately is just not something that is feasible for you. Maybe you default to the maybe, so then you can decide if you want to say yes or no later on. Again, more about pausing, more about taking those breaths, more about kind of counting and giving yourself space and time to actually think some things through. Finding that quiet space, maybe tuning into your inner wisdom. A lot of times our body and our minds and our whole being has a lot to offer us. If we feel like our fists tighten, or our chest tighten, or any other kind of physical bodily kind of reactions to a request, where it's kind of, you can physically and visually see, okay, that person doesn't really seem like they want to do that, but maybe out loud they're saying, yeah, I'd love to, but they're like balling their fists, or scrunching their face, or they just like are holding their breath because inside they're screaming no, but outside they're saying, oh yes, of course. And so being able to pay attention to the body's response is really huge. And then again, honesty is a huge tip of being really honest, and also being able to integrate vulnerability if you want to. So saying something like, you are important to me, and I want to be thoughtful and intentional about my response, right? So just again, that can be a little bit more long-winded than keeping it super simple, but if that is your style and that feels like it retains the relationship more in a way that you feel better about, then I don't think there's anything wrong with it at all. Okay. More questions about the recording. So yes, a follow-up email will be sent with the recording and slides. Great. Also seeing in the chat that because of family structure, this person was expected to say why. And so that's why this person over explains when they say no. Yeah, it definitely is not a lot. Again, back to those contributing factors of why we communicate the way we do. A lot of it can be traced back to childhood and things that we're told. And so again, it's not wrong if you do explain, but if you feel like it's possible for you to say no without explaining and you want to explore that, I think that that is completely valid as well. Okay. So again, with more practice tips. So these are ways that can increase your comfort and your familiarity with ease, because we are in the section of how do we actually say no. So we understand a little bit more about what our associations are and what can stand in the way, but now we're actually doing the work, right? So kind of, especially for those of you who may have selected, I can't remember the last time I said no, or, oh, it's been many, many months, where I felt like I was able to say no, then some of these practice tips might be helpful. So standing in the mirror and saying no out loud. Sometimes we like don't even say the word. Maybe we say other words for it of like, oh, maybe not, or I'm not sure, but we're not saying no. And so what do you look like when you're saying no? What does your face look like? What are your facial features? Do you look confident? Do you seem what does your voice sound like? Just kind of paying attention to that of do like sometimes when I used to be really hesitant to say no, I would have like a smaller voice. I would be quieter, and my body language would be a little bit more, you know, less assertive, I guess I could say. And so just paying attention to that and saying, there's TED Talks about the power pose and, power stances and how the way you're showing up physically in your body can have a lot of impact on your confidence levels, on the way that you are perceived by other people, all of those things. Another easy, maybe not easy, but it's up to you depending on how much you like to shop and things, but maybe practice saying no to commercials. I know that for me right now, Instagram ads have been kind of getting to me where the algorithms are just really paying attention to what I like, and I say no out loud. I scroll past it and I say nope, I would not like to shop now, and just saying no to either those ads or commercials or things where people are trying to convince you to say yes to what they're trying to sell you. Another practice opportunity could be that whenever you're faced with a decision to make, it doesn't have to be every single decision that you're offered, but one where you want to be a little more thoughtful about it, maybe you write out all of your options. And I think sometimes people don't always do that. They think yes is the only option, and they spend a lot of time convincing themselves or thinking of like, how can I make this work? Or just thinking about that being the only option. So making sure that no is an option for you in your list of what you can do and how you can approach things. And then having a conversation about your ability and desire to say no with someone safe. So I think that can be a very enlightening conversation for someone who has maybe known you for a long time or knows you really well. And you can just ask them, when's the last time you think I said no? Or you can ask them, do you think I have a hard time saying no? And they might say, oh yeah, and they'll might point out things that you maybe haven't even observed in the past because it's just status quo to you. Like it's just what you expect of yourself. And so you don't really question it. So that can be a really helpful conversation as well. Maybe you list people that you have difficulty saying no to, and you explore the reasons why. So again, we might feel super comfortable and secure in saying no to one friend or one family member, but when it comes to others, it might be something that is a little bit contentious or something that you hesitate before doing. And I think it's worth definitely exploring those reasons. So it could, again, lead you to your upbringing, to your parents parenting, any of those factors, maybe a specific experience, just kind of exploring that, especially if it is in the context of work too, of why with some people I can say no and others I feel like I can't, and that might reveal a bigger conversation that might be worth exploring. And then another practice is to write down a list of your foundational goals and values. So this is something that you can refer to when you're providing responses to people's requests of you. So maybe again, if we're trying to keep it simple and not over explain, we only use this list to make the decision ourselves. So we're not sharing that, oh, I value harmony, or I value, you know what I mean? Like whatever your value is, you don't have to name that to anyone, but it's something that might make it easier for you to say no, because you can clearly see, okay, saying yes to this would not be in alignment with these goals and my values. These goals and values say nothing about, going out of my way to do something for someone who's never done anything for me, whatever the case is. And then approaching your day. So maybe you spend a day just categorizing what you're saying yes and no to. Maybe you're saying yes to the piece of fruit you see on the counter. Maybe you're saying no to, I don't know. I'm blanking. I should just read what I wrote earlier, but I was trying to think of new examples. But maybe when you're waking up early, even when you want to sleep in, that's saying yes to your goal of making sure that you have slower mornings that set a positive tone for the day. Maybe asking for some time to think about a decision is saying no to urgency culture and yes to intentionality. So kind of thinking about, like, oftentimes we are saying no unless, like, it doesn't have to be explicitly us typing out the word no or saying no out loud. Sometimes we're saying no in other ways too, and bringing awareness to that can help us increase our confidence of, okay, I've said no before, I can say it again in other contexts too. Okay, these are more ways to say no. So I found this graphic online. It's from askingforwhatyouwant.com. Maybe I haven't gone to that website, but there might be a lot of other cool graphics. But it's just an encouragement to find your own personalized way for advocating for yourself, setting boundaries, and prioritizing your goals and centering your values too. So these are 12 ways to say no gracefully. This one's kind of funny. It says, I'm a no to that, but I'm a yes to you. So that might be a simple and short way of saying, addressing that fear that people have of, I don't want people to think that I don't like them. So you're really isolating that action or behavior request and separating it from your connection to that person. So that might be helpful. Maybe if they're asking to do something with you, you say, I'm not so into that, but you go have fun, and kind of being encouraging in that way. Again, maybe saying, I want to be in connection with you, but that doesn't work for me. Can we do this instead? So that would be an example of providing alternatives, right? So that tip that we talked about earlier. Not tonight. Could be a simple one. Period. Not tonight. Period. Send. It's really hard for me to say no to people, but I'm practicing being brave and more honest. So I'm going to say no right now. I've said that one before, and I would say that I think that one has worked really well for me too, because again, they don't take it personally because they know it's something you're just working on in general, and they see the value in you being able to say no. And so I think that one can be really helpful, but it's up to you, of course. I'm a no for now. I need to build more trust before I'm willing to consider that. No, thank you. That's not gonna work, not today. And another one on the bottom says, I don't have the internal resources to pull that off, or I don't have the internal resources for that right now, etc. So those are some examples. If any resonate with you, or you want to share any that you've tried in the past, feel free. Someone saying, working on saying no to more TV and or cell phone games to get more accomplished. The old, I have to stay home and wash my hair. So yeah, so a lot of what are we wanting to say no to, which we'll talk about a little bit more too. Some people, yeah, are saying, Simon from the X Factors, saying it's a no for me. And so depends on your personality and what fits. So these are all just offerings for you to adapt to your own life. Okay. So a little bit more of a discussion about values and goals. So being able to center our values and goals into our decisions can make saying no feel empowering and supportive, right? So like, how can the word no actually be empowering and supportive, which might be a very foreign concept if we've been told that saying no is, unacceptable or it's selfish or other things. And so thinking about what you value most in life in your relationships, so maybe you really value authenticity. And so that's something that bringing that to your awareness can make it easier to say no. Or maybe you value connection and you would say, if I betray myself by saying yes to this, that will be at a detriment to our connection to each other. Or maybe vulnerability is really important. So it's important for you to be able to be honest and be able to share how you're feeling without knowing how they're going to respond. Maybe peace, maybe generosity. Those things might be like really huge values for you that will contribute to your decision-making skills and your decision-making approach. Another question to kind of explore and think about is, do you betray your values and goals often to please other people? And so if the answer is yes, why do other people take precedence over your own needs? Kind of exploring that a little bit more. And if you dive into that a little deeper, you might find some answers and some revelatory things for why it is really difficult for you to say no. And then another, when we're thinking about goals, is this question of, are you actively working toward your goals, or is passivity manifesting and saying yes to things and regretting it later? So I think that that's something too of, sometimes we self-sabotage, sometimes we, don't allow ourselves to feel like we have the option to say no to things because we aren't focused on our goals, or we're not prioritizing what our needs are. So just some food for thought and thinking about situating our goals and values in the conversation and in the thought process. Okay. So someone said that they want to say no to games on their phones and stuff. So these are a lot of other things that I will offer to you. Feel free to add to them. But maybe you can feel good about saying no to doing things that aren't aligned with your values, or saying no to ways of thinking, acting, and responding that no longer serve you. So maybe it worked really well years ago, but now it's maladaptive and it's really not supporting your life and your goals and what you want to do. You can say no to thinking that I am my thoughts. You can say no to urgency culture, say no to holding on to, again, these habits and stories about yourself and your experiences that hold you back from feeling whole, connected, and worthy. Maybe you can feel good about saying no to things that would compromise your ability to do your pre-existing commitments mindfully. So those are all some things to consider as well. And if you have anything else that you are like, I feel good about saying no to this, it's easy. Feel free to send it in the chat. On the other side of that, we have some things that we can feel good saying yes to. So feeling good saying yes to honoring and listening to our bodies and our inner wisdom, taking opportunities to rest, having me time, saying yes to other people offering me support, saying yes to activities, projects, and events that I actually want to engage in and have the time and energy for, not just because I could do them. And also saying yes to prioritizing my goals and my values as well. So that is very closely in alignment with Brené Brown's concept of wholehearted living. And so it's letting go of all these things on the left and cultivating all of the things on the right. And I know they're actually doing a podcast series on her podcast, Unlocking Us. If you're really interested in that, they go through all those different guideposts. And it's been really interesting for me to listen to as well and think about what wholehearted living means for me. And part of it is being able to say no. And so maybe we're even saying no to the internal voice that's kind of doesn't want us to grow or doesn't want us to change. So that can be a barrier to being able to embrace this sense of wholehearted living. And so again, those conscious and intentional decisions about what we're saying yes to, what we're saying no to, all of those things can contribute to this way of living where we're cultivating things like gratitude, joy, a resilient spirit, self-compassion, play and rest, all of those things, and maybe letting go of comparison and perfectionism, and letting go of operating solely on what other people think about us. Someone's asking about the holistic so it's the holistic psychologist. Yeah. And this person is on YouTube. If you just type in the holistic psychologist, it will come up. But she has, millions of followers on Instagram, also came out with a book called How to Do the Work. So if you're interested in that, I can send it in the follow-up email as well. Okay, so if you feel like you don't have enough phrases already, I have even more. And so these are ones that we already kind of talked about Thank you for thinking of me, but I'm not able to do this at this time. So this is, speaking of the holistic psychologist, she kind of came up with these boundaries around urgency culture. So saying things like, I need to get back to you on that. I can't commit to that right now. I will let you know when the time is right for me to do this thing. I see this text that you sent. I see. So maybe this is the response for that person in the chat that was saying, my boss keeps emailing me. Maybe you say, I see your email and I plan on responding when I have the space to, or I plan on responding at this time. And then hopefully that would allow some of those requests to subside. And then maybe we initiate a conversation to say no in an informed way. So this was something I saw where they were talking about how saying, hey, can we talk, or I need to talk to you, can create a lot of anxiety. And so not knowing how to approach that in a way that won't be anxiety provoking could be a barrier. So this is a way to kind of navigate that, is saying, hey, when you have a moment, would you mind meeting or calling me to discuss this thing that you asked me to do? Or I have a couple questions about this. Do you mind giving me a call when you have the time to discuss it? Things like that, instead of kind of initiating something so they're wondering, oh, what does that person want to talk to me about? I'm anxious, and then kind of having them worry the whole time. So maybe you ask, how's your schedule looking later this week? I'd like to meet and talk about the specific thing. So having clarity around that, being very specific. Yeah, I'm seeing in the chat, struggling with perfectionism, which might lead to procrastination, and then other self-defeating behaviors or self-sabotage. Yeah, absolutely. I think that I do as well too, where it's that cyclical experience of it's all kind of playing into one another, and it can make it really difficult to feel like we can say no. So these are some more tips about saying yes to things you might say no to. So maybe you say no to your own needs. So this is on the right here, ways to say yes to expressing your needs in a relationship. So saying, I need you to listen without interrupting me. I need space to express my feelings. I need you to respect my alone time. I need my feelings to be acknowledged. I need you to apologize when you made a mistake. So maybe we're saying yes again to asserting our needs. Maybe we start small. Maybe we think about and focus on our why. Maybe if we're not always sharing them. Telling someone that we trust about our decision or a potential decision, kind of talking it through. Again, journaling is always a really excellent resource. And targeting the thoughts associated with your decisions as well too are some ways of being able to say yes to things that you traditionally say no to, even if you have a feeling that it might be helpful for you to say yes to. So this is the quote. I know earlier someone talked about no being a complete sentence. So this is a quote from Susan Gregg that really resonated with me. So no is a complete sentence, and so often we forget that. When we don't want to do something, we can simply smile and say no. We don't have to explain ourselves. We can just say no, period. Early on in my journey, I found developing the ability to say no expanded my ability to say yes and really mean it. My early attempts at saying no were often far from graceful, but with practice, even my no came from a place of love. Love yourself enough to be able to say yes or no. And so I really like that quote because it does speak to the simplicity of, like, again, not having to over explain or over apologize and allowing your response to be your response, but also the connection to being able to say no and being able to say yes wholeheartedly with it being an option. Because if we're saying yes only because that's the only option, then that can feel less authentic, right? So we can really say it and mean it. Okay, so I would like to invite you all to create a word cloud with me. So saying no to things that are not aligned with my values, priorities, or wellness allows me blank. So you were filling in the blank. So maybe the word you type into the word cloud is allows me peace, or allows me wholeness, or whatever the case is. So I'll send the link in the chat. The other option is, if you do have your phone out, you can do a little scan a QR code, pull it up that way, and start to generate some words. So I'd love to see what you have to say. I see people typing in the chat saying joy, empowerment, strength. And then there's another chat that talks about perfectionism and self-doubt and how that can lead to procrastination, right? A delayed response. And what helps is giving a deadline to something well in advance, right? Rebook it as if it was someone, rebook it as if someone else presented it to me. Yeah, that makes sense. People are saying peace of mind. So I'm gonna share this screen. So saying no to things that are not aligned with my values allows me freedom, peace of mind, control, strength, courage, power, focus on myself, respect myself, agency, to feel strong, to be me, allows me more time, pride, honesty, bodily autonomy, space, focusing on myself, self-care, tranquility. Yeah, freedom is a huge one. I'm seeing, yeah. Focus on my goals, to be me. Absolutely. Feel free to continue to contribute, but I really appreciate you all filling that out because I think having those reminders can be really helpful for reminding ourselves of why we're doing what we're doing, why we're choosing to say no. Great, thank you. All right, getting close to wrapping it up. So just a last few prompts. If you want to, again, complete the sentence of, I want to be able to say no to, what do we want to be able to say no to? I'm trying to think. For me, my goal for this upcoming month in July would be being able to say no to, I think more projects that like at work in particular. And so I think that with some restructuring at our organization and things, it can be really easy to assume extra responsibility in things. And so I want to be able to say no to things that really aren't in line with the vision and what my job description is. But I'm seeing people say that they want to say no to energy sucking vampires, say no to unhealthy habits, things that don't bring me joy, say no to doing staff work for a volunteer organization, and instead be able to do more big picture policy direction. Yeah. So saying no to the volunteer organization and saying yes to big picture policy direction. Saying no to going out when I want to stay in. Yep. So honoring ourselves. Saying no to keeping items that cause clutter in my home and cause me great anxiety, right? Saying no to things that don't bring you joy, like Marie Kondo. Saying no to things that waste your time. Saying no to people that I'm interested in dating. Certain requests that they have in availability, just because I want them to like. Just because I want them to like me doesn't mean I have to say yes to everything. Absolutely. Say no to people who want me to share things that are too personal. People who want to violate your boundaries, saying no to that. Saying, oh, I see, there's a correction. Saying no to doing more than I can handle. That's a huge one. I should add that to my list. I should put that on my bulletin board here and say no. It's okay to say no. Extra side projects that others want me to do, but they're not in line with my position. That's a huge one. Say no. I want to be able to say no to being pressured to go out, right? To negative people, negative energy, saying no to society's demands on what I should value and instead follow my own values. Absolutely. Those are all really, really great. And then the last chat here for the next minute or so, rapid fire response. I want to be able to say yes to, so we're leaving on this positive note of saying no to those things, but alternatively saying yes to, I think my big one for the month of July will be saying yes to relaxation, opportunities to relax, because I think that first of all, never really create those opportunities for myself, but also struggle with saying yes when they are presented to me. So that's something I definitely want to focus on. Others want to say yes to spending more time with their kids and family, wanting to say yes to inner peace, wanting to say yes to taking care of myself first, right? Of that whole idea of you can't pour from an empty cup. Saying yes to my own needs and not feeling selfish about it, saying yes to positivity, to healthy environments, saying yes to alone time. Yeah, those are all really great. Okay, thank you so much. If you're interested in more resources about saying no, these are a bunch of articles that are on the internet and easily accessible to you. So feel free. When you get the PDF of the slides, you'll be able to click on every single one of these so you can explore if you want to learn even more. There's a lot of books that I've written about this too. Full disclosure, I haven't read any of these. So if you read them, feel free to let me know what your thoughts are. But these are some that I recommended on being able to say no. And then this is an invitation, as always, to connect with us. Visit our website, www.wadvocates.org/events is where you will sign up for other webinars. We're getting them established. You should receive an email if you're on our listserv, which you will be if you are registered for this event. And you'll get an email about all the upcoming webinars in July, and you'll be able to register for free, but I'll send it probably after the holiday weekend, since I know a lot of us will be out of town or traveling or not on your emails. I hope we're saying no to responding when we're on PTO. And so we also have our 24-hour crisis hotline if you want to add that to your phone for any reason, just to have it on your person. Feel free to email us at outreach@wadvocates.org, or resources like our Facebook page, Instagram, Twitter. Also subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's where we will post the recording. So I'll put that in the chat so you have that. And then here's information about how to request a certificate of attendance. Saying lots of gratitude in the chat. If you'd like to share your gratitude in our survey, we would love to hear from you. It should pop up when you close out of the webinar, but if not, you can click on it and provide your feedback, good or bad. We want to hear it all. We're looking to continue to improve our online programming. And if you really love the webinars, that's important for us to know too, because we are thinking about how we're going to transition to being back in person and doing in-person webinars, in-person presentations and trainings again. So we'll see what the future holds for us, but I hope that we can continue to at least have a few webinars here and there. So thank you all. I see someone said, thank you all for not saying no to attending this webinar. Yeah, that's funny. I like that. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to say yes to ending early and giving you a minute of your time back. So I'll go ahead and close out the webinar here. So I'm going to end the recording.